Equal loudness curves for your listening levels need to be taken into account along with FR.
Who said this?
Scott.
Scott Pledger?
Scott Pledger.
Scott. I expect better from you.
Oh, we love Scott. Scott is the man.
So, I mean, what is your qualm with that, Blaine? Is it just that the equal loudness research itself is flawed?
Well, my qualm with that is that we know that what?
I just read his other one that y'all should not still be going. I've been on a whole hike and had a very close encounter, a very close moose encounter. Y'all still be going.
Yeah, I mean we've all had moose encounters in our time.
I had a bear encounter.
Am I just like?
I had a bear encounter that was like really.
Have you not had a moose encounter?
I have not had a moose encounter.
Haven't spent enough
time. Do you
time
touch grass at all?
Minimally.
He doesn't touch.
I live in like a city-ish type area, so it's mostly just like walks around my general vicinity.
If you touched grass, you would encounter a moose.
I don't know.
I think that's actually the absolute bar.
I don't even know if there are meese in my area.
That's fucked up, man.
Yeah.
Anyway,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to talk about that. How instead of a moose sighting, it was like a bear that was like 5 feet from me. Just while I was walking down the path, explaining why we don't need to be afraid of wild animals, and then there's a bear right there.
I mean, you don't need to be afraid of them; just be cautious.
No, but yeah, exactly.
That happened to me when I was out shooting recently. Actually,
there are no mooses in my location.
I like.
There was like a black bear that was like 30 feet away from. Thankfully, it was just the road when we were driving in. But it was just like, yeah, no, that's just a fucking whole ass bear there.
Yeah,
it wasn't bothering anybody. We didn't bother him, but still.
Sorry, to get back to the equal loudness thing, did he mean actually what I'm wondering is if he means like pink noise normalized or something like that?
No, what he means, I'm almost certain what he means is that we need to pay attention to the listening levels that people use. And the problem with that is that we don't actually have any objective data that indicate that there is a listening level dependency for preferred FR. We have a bunch of conjecture that people have been making for the last 60 years, but I am literally aware of no data that suggests that people prefer a different FR at different levels.
Well, what about, well, I mean, it's interesting, but so do you remember when Dimitri was asking, what about the stimulus? At Sean's
talk? Yeah.
Yeah. I do think that there is some... I do think there's a there when it comes to program material that has yet to be properly explored, or like,
well, no, because it's not the average. Like this is probably one of the reasons. Well, this is conceivably one of the reasons.
I wasn't talking about equal loudness, by the way. I was talking about. I think Dimitri talking about program material might have been gesturing towards well, I guess lower average dynamic range, higher average loudness, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
or the spectral content of the program, like those things.
Well, that's the one where I feel like we have a more conclusive, like, no, it doesn't make that much of a difference.
Ooh, I wouldn't say that.
You wouldn't?
No.
Based on Sean's data?
Yes.
Explain.
So for Sean's data, we have. So, all right. To be clear, I'm not saying we're talking about things that shift you from one listener class to another, but I am saying that you could be easily seeing a variation of north of 2 dB in terms of preferred bass or treble levels between two different pieces of music.
I'm saying that's not much. I'm not saying it doesn't make a difference.
Okay, so Scott is saying, isn't it conjecture that the shape of the FR curves should not change at different volume levels, e.g. that you can change a target up and down the SPL range and the shape should remain? That is not conjecture because we have actually tested it, and there is evidence that indicates that at least over about a 10 dB scale, there is a fairly coherent preference. And in fact, the preference variations that exist are inverse to equal loudness. That is, louder listeners prefer more bass, not less.
But 10 dB is not 20 dB.
Amazing insights. Yes, no, I mean, it's something where...
it was 20 dB?
Exponential.
It is something that would be worth testing. It is a listening test that would be pretty easy. and it's a listening test that I would like to do at some point.
Yeah, you could get to the extremes of this, right? And just see if that holds true, as you go out.
10 dB. All right, someone says 10 dB is not significant at equal loudness. That is objectively not true. That can have a massive change in the shape of an equal loudness contour depending on where it is. Like,
yeah, the difference between 40 and 60 or 40 and 50 dB would probably
I don't
be.
know.
The ISO
weird.
226 curves are the ones you're thinking of. Donjo.
I'm more interested in like the actual. So if you're testing like EQ curves against one another, just testing them one against the other when there's meaningful adjustments isn't necessarily the same volume because they're not normalized the same. And so because people like
and the
things that
problem
are
with
louder,
normalizing is like,
but you know what I mean, right?
music.
Like people if people prefer things that are louder generally, they might prefer the one that just if you were to have them be pink noise, that one would end up being louder.
Well, but there's an additional problem, which is that humans don't necessarily weight perceived loudness on a crescendo and perceived loudness
You're going to talk
on
about
the
crest
minuendo the
factor.
same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and because the spectral content of peaks is different than the spectral content of the average, which is much more dominated by low frequencies. So loudness matching with different frequency responses and music is actually quite difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And so it's something where, again, it'd be great to be able to control for this, but to some degree, my perspective is like, I don't care so much about that because I'd rather let people adjust to their own preferred listening levels and then see what they prefer.
Yeah,
And
because
then if there was a quantifiable variation that was very large, then I would look into the why.
I don't think, the loudness normalization thing doesn't necessarily. It might change the results slightly, but I don't think it's one that is as consequential, especially over a larger sample size.